Welcome to Becoming Untriggered, a podcast brought to you by psychodynamic coaches and parents of three, Lavinia Brown and Andrew Lynn.
Together we normalise and unpack common challenges faced by couples and parents, explore how these could be symptoms of unprocessed trauma, and support you with the tried and tested tools for you to show up as the mum or dad, partner, and person you deserve to be. Welcome to Becoming Untriggered. This might well be the most explosive episode we've ever done. It was quite hard not to be triggered myself when talking about the outline for this episode, but we got through it and we'd love to know what you think. So today is going to be talking about, are you emasculating your husband? So what is the role now of masculinity? What does it mean? And are we as women and mothers perhaps demanding too much of our men or not enough?
Yes, very interesting and topical subject. There's a lot in the news about toxic masculinity and then the other side of that, men being emasculated. And I think the truth, as always, is that there is a middle ground that we want to try and get to today. But in summary, I don't think it's actually possible to be emasculated by somebody else. It's only possible to be emasculated if you have certain wounds in place that we're going to go through and discuss today.
I completely agree, actually. So that is a really good point that we'll unpack later. But let's start with toxic masculinity, what that is, what that looks like in today's society, because obviously things look very different in the past. So for me, and I know you don't particularly agree with me, for me, toxic masculinity is rooted in an abuse of power, a power that I don't believe was fairly granted to men. We live in a patriarchy, at least in the West, and that means that men have been given superior roles. They often get paid more than women. And when that power is abused and it's not consensual, that for me is toxic masculinity. And that can look like violence. It can look like abuse of physicality. It can look like abuse of more money, all of that kind of thing. That's what I think toxic masculinity looks like.
We're not far off. I mean, I think toxic masculinity is like shadow masculinity. It's the extreme version of winning, drive, success. And it's when they come at the expense of others. If you win, but everyone else loses, that's toxic. If you are in a relationship with power is not necessarily a bad thing, but if you're exerting that power over other people with violence or control, that's when it's toxic. The problem I have with the definition now is that I believe that masculine characteristics like success, growth, winning, wealth, abundance, all those types of things, they can get wrongly categorized as toxic by people that are scared of those types of things.
Quite a few of those things that you just described as masculine, I wouldn't describe as masculine. But I actually like what you said about the power. Maybe I'm associating toxic masculinity with an abuse of power, but that's because, going back to where we started, that's because we live in a patriarchy. So those in power are usually men. So yeah, I think the two have maybe become a bit conflated. The point being, whatever this looks like, this toxic masculinity, this abuse of power, and those in power are usually men, there's been a massive backlash, or kind of. I mean, it didn't really get us very far, but there was a mini backlash, shall we say, against it with the Me Too movement. Definitely people abusing their power sexually against the other sex. And that maybe led to a more open admittance of what women want, which is something softer, kinder, more compassionate, more emotionally available, more nice. And then I think, and obviously I'm generalizing hugely, but I think women then didn't particularly like that. I think where we are now is that women don't want a toxic guy, toxically masculine guy, but we also don't want the other extreme of the Mr. Nice guy who isn't a man at all. They're like another woman, but a bad version of the woman. So it's not very attractive because when they try and be more like a woman, they fail.
I mean, I still think that we're at the very outset of that, the uncovering of that power versus sexual abuse thing that goes on at the moment. I think it's more of a backlash from both men and women from absent fathers. So a lot of our clients, us, we had men that were very focused on work, external, money, and they weren't emotionally available in the house. They weren't available to us as men, and they weren't available to you as women. So we decided that we didn't want to be like that for our partners and for our children. And you decided you wanted something that was different from that. But the other side of that isn't necessarily what you want either. That's not necessarily the right solution. There's something in the middle that women actually desire. But back to the point of emasculating partners, emasculating men, do you think that's where it comes from? The perceived desire of that opposite?
I think a lot of us are not wanting to be like our mothers either. Again, some mothers were very overwhelmed. They were very volatile. They couldn't cope. We want to be more calm and stable. And we live in a society where there isn't that village. There isn't that support for women or mothers. So we naturally turn to our partners for that. And I don't necessarily think that is the right thing to do, but it's all that we've got. So it's really difficult for women and men. Women and men are stuck in this castle that is your home. There is no extended family sometimes. There is no extended community. So you're having to take on these co-parenting roles that aren't necessarily good role models in themselves. I mean, I did do this as well, and most of my clients do this as well. And that is seeing their partners, in this case, their husbands, as co-parenting assistants. That's never good.
Nothing more emasculating than that list.
For me, this isn't the list. This is about wanting someone to help you with getting the kids to bed, with the bath, with the getting dressed in the morning, with the homework, with the food prep, with the who needs what after school because of extracurricular activities, the kind of routine. Basically, women want to let go of some of the mother load. The problem is, because we have usually taken on a more dominant role in the home, even if we're working full time, then we're asking for an assistant. We're asking the man to step into the bits that we can't do or don't have the time to do or don't have the capacity to do. And I know my clients do this and I know I do this. We have certain ways of doing things. The problem is, if you're going to ask someone else to help you, which makes complete sense, you're going to have to let them do it their way. And that's what women don't want to do. They don't want to delegate the how. They want the support, but they're not willing to compromise on how that thing gets done. And that's where so much conflict comes up, because the man's not doing it right. He's not doing it enough. He's doing it at the wrong time. But I think that's a bit unfair, because to be given a list of things to do and how to do it and when to do it and for how long and why, that's difficult for anyone to step into someone else's shoes. It's practically impossible. And yet I think part of them are also setting their men up to fail, because it's a role that we don't necessarily want, this mother load, but we've been given it. So we might as well tell ourselves that we're doing it better.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think part of it is also a cry for help. So it's like, look at what I'm doing. Look at how hard it is. Like you said, I don't think it's anyone's fault, but it is really, really difficult to step from the role when you're a director, a CEO of a business, and you're doing the thinking and you're doing the strategy, to the PA. And that's the bit that's hard. That's the bit that's emasculating. But I don't think that there's much of a solution, because the women can't handle the load. Somebody has to kind of run the show. So the men want to help. They want to be present. But it's about how you do it, how you share it, how you communicate with each other.
Yeah, exactly. It's about how you share it. I don't think one person has to run the show. I think you can share it. It's how you do that and still remain in partnership without falling out with each other. That's the problem. And that's where childhood issues can come up, because we've been trained unconsciously to view husbands as a certain thing, fathers as a certain thing, men as a certain thing. And in fact, that is exactly what I get my clients to unpack when we're doing the father imprint. what did you learn from the way that your dad showed up and was a dad with you about what dads are? What did you learn about how your dad role modeled being a partner romantically to your mother? And what did you learn that women can expect from men? That dynamic is what gets seared into your mind. So what we expect in terms of sharing, which most of our parents didn't do, is still somehow based on the past. So we're trying to do something different with no role models when we've got very strong influences from the past that may or may not have been positive.
And we're trying to find our way. Like, my journey has been trying to find my way in my relationship with the masculine, with myself. And it's not really about masculine or feminine. I'm a man, but it is about me finding my balance. It is really difficult with the cultural expectations, with the trauma we talked about before, the Mr. Nice Guy stuff, the shame. But then there is also this desire for a certain type of person from the partner.
I want to touch on trad wives, because you could say that's one version that is the opposite of what we've just been saying, sharing. I think a lot of modern men do want to share parenting. They want to be there for their kids because their dads weren't. You want to make sure that that's not coming from a wound. It's coming from a value. And I think that's where a lot of dads trip up, and women. You're trying to be something that your dad wasn't, rather than it coming from your desire internally to show up in a certain way. But trad wives is a different way of doing it. That's not wanting to share the load. It's saying, I'm going to take up certain roles that I associate with being a female partner wife, and you're going to take up a different role. This is also to do with how you were brought up and whether you have the capacity to take on all of the nurture and all of the soothing and all of the traditionally maternal roles. And I did not. I was brought up in an era where at school we were told you can do anything, you can be whoever you want. So it was all about what kind of career you were going to have. Parenting wasn't mentioned. So not only did I get that from school, but I also didn't have the skill set passed down to me from my parents. So I didn't want to be. I didn't want to be, and I don't want to be a trad wife. I want to use my brain in different ways than it's used in being a mother, whether that's right or wrong.
Don't you think this is all just cyclical, though? It's like that women were in the home, then they decided they didn't want to be limited to just in the home. Then they went out, started working, and everyone's like, yeah, 2 incomes, this is great. And then everyone realized that that wasn't particularly a solution to anything. The kids don't get what they need. You don't particularly live this brilliant life. The career's not that fulfilling. You're just making money for some global corporation. And it's like, okay, well, let's go back to something else. Let's go back to this child-focused, family-centric model where there's always someone at home and they're focused on that. And it's the maternal, traditional wife.
Yeah. Another form of that backlash is dinks, dual income, no kids, trying something else.
Yeah.
I'm not going to bother with kids because it looks shit and I had a shit time. So
and the reality is none of them really can work within the society unless you don't have no financial requirements, and therefore you can just choose which roles suit you within your dynamic as a couple and however you want to raise your kids. Then that's the only instance where you can truly decide what you want to do. Otherwise, you're bound by how much money you need to earn rather than what's best for you as a partnership and what's best for your children. I want to talk a little bit about a point I mentioned earlier about men and masculinity and whether it's possible to be emasculated by somebody else, because I really don't think it is. We as men, we all have our own relationship with how masculine we are. And really, what I think masculinity comes down to in a man is authenticity, because we're all different characters. Some people will be old school masculine, some people will be slightly more feminine, and we all have a different balance, but we're all authentic. If we're being authentically masculine and feminine and balanced in ourselves, then nobody else can impose anything else on us. So why wouldn't we be that way? Mostly it's in 2 forms. If we had to adapt from our authentic character as a child and either be a people pleaser or mainly a people pleaser, because you stop being yourself and you start putting other people's opinions above yours. That's when you start adapting your character. That makes you more of a nice guy, because you want to make other people happy rather than just doing what you want. That can seem not very masculine because it's not very authentic and purposeful. And the other thing is what I talked about earlier, is where there is two things. Number one, if you had an absent father, and that was me. So my father was absent. So growing up, my mantra was I don't want to be like that. So I'm going to try and be there. Again, that's not particularly authentic or masculine. That's just having the opposite reaction to my father. And the third thing is the shame and the guilt, which comes externally about toxic masculinity. Are you being too toxic? You need to be... I can remember this thing in the 90s, probably, and most of our listeners won't even remember this, but it was called a 90s man.
Yeah.
The men were really nice and the women were like ladettes.
Yeah.
And they went down the pub and they were drinking and they were like lads, and all the men were like, oh, we're really nice guys. That was just a societal thing that I grew up. I was like 15 to 20 in that era. So that was what I was absorbing as I was transitioning from a boy to a man. So again, we can take all these things on and none of them are authentic. But what they do is they create an environment, an internal environment where you can be emasculated. Because if I'm a people pleaser and my partner wants me to do everything for them, support them, I may want to do that, but also I kind of need to do that to get their acceptance and their love, because I have this people pleaser unconscious function running within me. So again, that's not very masculine.
Yeah, it's whether you're taking on what society's prescribing in that moment, which is going to be a fad, or whether you are able to connect to who you really are in that moment and be that regardless, which I think also comes back to developmental trauma. If you're talking about people pleasing, if as a young child you were facing more outwards than you were inwards, small children should be mini narcissists. They should be utterly focused on their needs and emotions, what makes them feel good, what doesn't make them feel good. But if you had parents who weren't attuned to your needs, so you had to calm them down, create the safety that you needed by being whatever it was that they required in that moment, you would have learned to be a people pleaser. You are more attuned to other people's needs than your own. So if you're more outward facing than you are inward facing, of course you can heal this. That's what we do. But you're going to then go through life ultra attuned to what other people are expecting of you, including society. So yeah, you're going to hear the Mr. Nice Guy, 90s man, ladettes, toxic masculinity, the Me Too movement. You're just going to be blown about in the wind because you don't have that core, because you never developed it. You weren't allowed. You didn't have the opportunity of finding out who you were and getting the unconditional love you needed to anchor in that sense of self.
Yeah, that's a good point. And actually thinking about this, the work we do with clients, a lot of the couples work and a lot of the work I do with men is about this concept of becoming the lighthouse in the storm of the family and the storm of the feminine energy, which is what you're saying. It's about not being able to be blown around by society, by the emotions of your partner, by the emotions of your children, and just being solid within that. That's a journey to healing.
Yeah, 100%. And that is the masculine trait, though. Women are more collaborative, co-creative. Men are singular. They are purpose, linear, rational. So that becomes very attractive. So then we're back to what women really want. And are we emasculating you? We kind of are, in that we're asking for someone who is as emotionally in tune as we are. I think that women are more in touch with their emotions. We can argue about whether that's because of society or because it's a trait. I don't know. But we are, and we're asking that of you. And yet we don't really want that. We want someone that is different to us.
So answer me this. Some people say that women are always going to challenge men in some of the books I've read, etc., about masculinity. Does a woman always test a man and ask him because she wants him to push back and say, no, actually, I'm kind of boundaried? Or is a woman constantly asking him because she wants him to actually do what she's asking him to do?
It depends. I mean, that's a tricky question. I'd say both. If I think back to us, we had 3 kids under 3.5. That was hard. Could I have managed? No, I could not have managed. I mean, I've said this before. At some point, I would rather not be here. I think our kids would be better off without me. It was that bad. So there's no way I could have got through that without you being a co-parent. No way.
Completely understandable.
Right. But
Normal.
That's where I was asking for your support as a co-parent, which a trad wife might think was wrong. So I absolutely needed you to follow through on what I was asking for. Sometimes do I want you to push back and assert your difference? Yeah, I think that makes a relationship more interesting. It's diverse. I don't want the same as me. I don't want a copy of me. Back to your point. I want something that's strong. Look at Peppa Pig. And it's quite interesting that tiny children watch this. Daddy Pig is utterly emasculated. He's not healthy. He's not in good shape. He gets things wrong. He takes the piss out of himself. Everyone else takes the piss out of him. That's an emasculated man. No one wants that. I want someone that's strong in who they are. Yeah. And then I can choose to be with them or with someone else, but not someone who's trying to be more like me, because then I can't feel you. Yeah. I'm just feeling the fakeness and it feels uncomfortable.
So I think it's important for women to be aware of where that desire is coming from. Because if a woman desires connection, for example, and to feel the power of her man, she might do that by like nagging. She might do that by asking for little things to be done. And there might be an instance where she needs that stuff done. And there might be an instance where she's just kind of there asking for a connection. A lot of the times, I think the man just does all the stuff because he's like, well, there's peace at the end of it. And actually, if the woman is unconscious of what she actually wants, then that list of requirements just keeps going on. And the man just finishes the list and then goes to the shed and fucks off because he's finished the requirements. When actually, if the woman's aware, she's like, okay, I need you to do these couple of things. But actually, what I really want is just to feel you.
Yeah.
I just really want your thing. And that's the opposite of emasculating for a man because he's like, wow, I just need to turn up.
Yeah.
I just need to turn up and be strong and connect with you.
Yeah, and we talked about this when conflict, right? How men and women deal with conflict differently. When I couldn't do the thing that I was meant to do and I asked for your help, I didn't want you to do it for me. I know that's what I asked for, but I didn't. I wanted to know that you were seeing me in my struggle and were prepared to help if I needed it. It's a bit like narcissists, that narcissists feed off your energy. I think women like to feed off presence. We feel safe and calm in the presence of a strong masculine. So that doesn't necessarily look like you doing things straight away, but knowing that you will be able to do the thing when it really needs to be done. And I think you're quite good at that, actually. Before, you probably did things straight away when I asked you, or not at all, so I'd nag. And then you got into a bad, naggy, don't want to do it dynamic. Whereas now, if I ask you to do something that I can't do or I need support with, you won't necessarily do it straight away. You'll do it when you feel it's urgent, which can be really, really annoying for me because I might think it's more urgent than you do. But there's something around you taking control of it in your way, not necessarily being my assistant. And that is attractive, even though it might be annoying at the time. I think women need to be aware of what their true need is when they're asking for collaboration or support. Is it because you can't cope? Is it because you just want someone to be present with you? Is it because you want someone to feel strong when you're not feeling strong? In other words, when can you rely on your inner parent instead, rather than relying on your partner for some unprocessed need, which actually really is your stuff that you should be looking at?
My conclusion, especially for the men out there, is that it's impossible to be emasculated by somebody else. So if you're feeling emasculated by your partner, then there's actually work to do yourself. Being emasculated is almost traumatized masculinity. And so just as toxic masculinity is the shadow and is traumatized masculinity. The route to masculinity is not some external destination. It's a journey to authenticity, healing the people pleaser, letting go of the shame and the guilt and the trauma around your relationship with your father and your masculinity. And then it's about finding yourself. That's the first thing. And number two, which is really important, which is, like I said, is a lot of the work I do, is becoming that lighthouse of presence in the family, turning up so your partner feels you when you're there, turning up when your kids feel you when you're there. To do that, what you got to do is you got to get rid of your own baggage, your own repressed emotion, the sadness, the anger, the guilt you're carrying around in your body from your own experiences. If you turn up in the family with all that stuff already up to here, you can't take any more on. You have to flee. You can't be present. So you've got to get rid of your own baggage, and you've got to find your own purpose and authenticity. And then you can turn up on whatever scale of masculinity is authentic to you.
Exactly. So I don't think it's about demonizing people like Andrew Tate or Jordan Peterson, whatever you think of them. They are actually strong, but they're not strong because they're being a certain type of masculine. They are being authentic. I think that's what people don't like. It's not toxic masculinity that they are portraying. They are portraying toxic views, but they are very authentic about how, and they are in integrity with how they enact and communicate those. That is attractive to women. If what we discussed was helpful, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. For more of the same, check out my social media, The Inner Child Healing Expert, or to work with me, go to laviniabrown.com.
You can find me on andrewlynn.net or Life Coach for Dads on Instagram. We work with both individuals and couples. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out. Thanks for listening.